So we're really fortunate today to have a great guest caller, Mrs. Catherine von Burg from SimpliPhi Solar, SimpliPhi Power, I should say. Catherine, can you hear us right there? Are you online? Okay.
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. Welcome to the Solar Coaster, Catherine.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we just heard from you. You're a long-time contributor now, so I really appreciate you making the time to come and join us here at the Solar Coaster. And we are, and once again, thanks so much for joining us. We did put out a feeler. It was like maybe about 2 weeks ago during Hurricane Lane, and Catherine, very kindly made time to speak to us about energy storage in the midst of the kind of brouhaha with the hurricane kind of bearing down on us. So that was really cool of you.
Oh, no, again, I appreciate the opportunity, and you have quite a show. I really enjoy the facts and some of the important information that you share with your listeners to help educate them on everything having to do with their access to energy, from rates to different issues, technology in the field. So it's valuable that you've given me an opportunity to speak with you.
All right. Well, thanks so much. We'll take those compliments and we can get them.
That. Education is our mission here. And at the end of the day, if we could sum it to one word, that's it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, we're learning as we go along, and we find it to be just a really incredible journey. And so that's what we try to do out here at the Solar Coaster. And we're going to do some of that today, too, because you've got an amazing company out there with SimpliPhi Power, and we're really excited to learn all about it. And as we're trying to dig in and kind of get our head around it, we're like, there is so much going on here that it's kind of hard to figure out where to start, And so we did get a little bit of the story before, but I think we got to start at the beginning. There's kind of no getting around that. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and about the company and how it got off the ground, and then we'll kind of find our way through the story.
Sure. So I am the CEO and president, and just basically our company designs and manufactures efficient and non-toxic enduring energy storage and management systems that can seamlessly integrate any power generation source in conjunction with or independent of the grid. And so especially within the context of Lane, why is energy storage important? Well, as we all know, without energy storage, renewable sources of power can be intermittent, but so too can the grid in these types of catastrophic scenarios in which the centralized delivery of power breaks down. And so with energy storage, security can be built in for systems that are grid tied, but certainly for off-grid as well.
Right.
The origin of our company, really the catalyst for the technology, really began in our CTO's garage in LA, like any self-respecting entrepreneur. And Stuart Lennox was the special effects guy in the movie industry. And
no kidding.
Back then, that didn't mean digital solutions. It meant challenging special effects using equipment that very often required access to power. And whether you're on a set in a movie studio or in a remote location, whether it's an urban area like New York or in the Amazon, the use of generators was really the only choice, and or lead-acid batteries. And diesel generators obviously can provide that off-grid power in remote locations, but the noise, the pollution, the cost, the logistics of getting the diesel there was prohibitive and certainly very costly and challenging. And also lead-acid batteries, the industry incumbent at the time, was the only solution, and they are very large and cumbersome for the amount of energy that you can pull out of them, and certainly the power as well. And often we're failing and challenged by hotter climates and harsher use cases. So Stuart looked at the options as he was designing special effects and powering up the equipment, and felt like there had to be a better way. As a result, he was one of the first innovators around the earliest lithium-ion chemistry, the lithium Cobalt Oxide, the early cells developed by Panasonic. And while the energy density and the power output of that lithium cobalt oxide chemistry offered vast improvement over the large, cumbersome lead acid, there was a major drawback, and that's something known as thermal runaway. It's what causes fires today, even in the industry. So there's a lot of confusion, unfortunately, for companies like us that have chosen to move away from that toxic lithium chemistry based on cobalt. Lithium does not cause the thermal runaway and is not the toxic and hazardous material. It's cobalt. But that was what was available in 2002, and Stuart began to innovate and develop a mobile portable line of power packs that were fully integrated solutions that could be charged with folding solar panels, generators, the grid, whatever the power source was. And these mobile packs were wearable in the form of belts for hands-free access to power with movie cameras and lighting, and then also larger packs to power up some of the equipment. In 2007-8, the newer innovations in lithium-ion chemistry became available and on the market. And Stuart then transitioned and was one of the first innovators around that chemistry, and it's the chemistry we use today, the lithium ferro or iron phosphate. And the advantages of that chemistry was that it eliminated the cobalt, which also has some serious supply chain issues with child labor and other really deleterious impact on environment and those that mine it. So it eliminated the cobalt and therefore the toxicity and the thermal runaway. It also had the benefits of exponentially increasing cycle life. So lithium cobalt oxide, that chemistry has a much shorter cycle life. And to protect from thermal runaway, you engage in shallow discharging and longer charge and discharge times similar to lead acid. So it was an improvement, but there were still some drawbacks because of the cobalt and the hazardous and unstable nature of the cobalt oxides. So moving to that chemistry, Stuart continued to innovate under the Liberty Pack line of portable mobile products. And when I met Stuart in 2009-10, the vision was to scale, to take that platform technology that he had developed over almost good 10 years of mobile deployments in the film and movie industry and scale those up to start bringing this solution to residential and commercial customers and users. And we were really one of the first, if not the first in the industry to introduce lithium-ion or lithium ferrophosphate solutions for residential and commercial. Today, we still offer those portable and mobile power packs that are fully integrated, come with the inverter and the charge controller built in. They have USB ports, AC outlets, and those are used in emergency response and disaster relief use cases, but they're also used by outdoor enthusiasts as well, and they allow people to take their power with them and to harvest and generate their own power anywhere they are with folding solar panels and, again, other types of generation assets. So in 2010, we founded the company. Back then, we were known as OES, Optimized Energy Storage. And in 2015, we really wanted to create a brand that captured in our name what we do, and that is to bring balance and proportion and access to power for people. And so SimpliPhi is spelled PHI for the golden mean, which is a mathematical principle found throughout nature, but also mechanical designs that is all about component parts coming together to bring an integrated and balanced whole. And so those principles inform how we design and manufacture our batteries, but it also relates to how we look at people and how they relate to power and creating balance and proportion. So when you think about what happened in Hawaii with Hurricane Lane and thinking about how people would relate to power, these mobile portable packs become a real resource to create security on the go if people have to evacuate, but then certainly the residential and commercial systems in homes and businesses, hospitals, schools, that also create security and resiliency. And the last comment I'll make is our choice to use the lithium ferro or iron phosphate was intentional. In the early days and even now, it's a little more expensive than the lithium cobalt oxide, but we have chosen not to make a trade-off between security and safety and toxicity on behalf of our customers, and to help develop a market and over time drive down costs. Our costs have certainly dropped by over 50% since 2010, and they continue to come down. And through innovations, we'll constantly increase energy capacity as well as the cost coming down. So
you
the
see
proposition is really, if people are looking for energy security, how can you think about security if you're using a fundamentally risky chemistry? And how can you think about storing clean energy in toxic batteries?
Right. Yeah, you covered a lot of ground. Thank you so much. That's a lot of great stuff in there. And I totally get it. And I love the fact that you started out with this discussion about Stewart in this cinema, and then he's kind of it's a scratch your own itch kind of situation, right? Okay, I got this problem. How do I fix it? You drew that. I saw the garage. I saw him in there in my mind, kind of knocking away on some system, the Liberty packs, and then from there, just this ubiquity of the need for clean, renewable energy with storage, and then there's all these different avenues that you've pursued. And then, of course, we have this kind of, I don't know if we want to call it a Betamax, VHS kind of thing happening with storage right now, and where you have the lithium cobalt manganese or the cobalts, and then you have the ferrous phosphate conversation. We had on a fellow the other day, Jay, who was it? Was it Mike Riley from HNU that said he was talking about the industry that is using lithium cobalt manganese and the other, I guess, derivatives of that, or the other variations of it, and that he goes, when you have a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. So he was talking about the EV industry and trying to kind of move in on that and work on that type of chemistry. But of course, for homes and for living with these systems, you want the safest possible chemistry that exists, and lithium ferrous phosphate is definitely the one that people are talking about. There are a couple other adherents out there, like the Blue Planet Energy guys and the Sonnen Battery guys, and those are the kind of people in that side, the companies in kind of that side of the conversation. And it's definitely I guess the costing is a clear area that we need to look at, and we want to drive those costs down. But also, like you said, the longevity gives us a better kind of cost per cycle, right? So the actual overall value is better than some of these other chemistries out there.
Yeah,
so,
that's what I was going to say. Total cost of ownership is going to be affected by that drastically, and that's what you look at when you're looking for a return on investment for your home.
Yeah, and then of course, but the thing, Catherine, I have to just bring this bring this up here. When you talked about the supply chain of cobalt, I found that particularly interesting. I myself have been involved in the non-governmental, organization world, the NGOs and NPOs with EcoShip and Peaceboat. You know of them because we're going to be talking about them at SPI later on. By the way, thank you very much for accepting our invite to participate as a panelist on that radio show. It's going to be a great one.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then but you're talking about the supply chain of cobalt. That actually was off my radar, even as a fellow that is kind of thinking about these things. I didn't.
And I was talking about that on the plane to Vegas more than last year. So it was a year and a half ago. We were talking about this exact issue, that cobalt is tied to some really unsustainable. Even if you take away the geopolitical aspects of things, it's also it's a byproduct of mining from other metals, and you cannot really go out and just mine for cobalt the same way you would mine for gold or nickel or copper or something.
I think it's amazing that the development of this technology that could be kind of is right now. With like Tesla, for example, they're using cobalt, correct, right? And other kinds of companies out there that are moving in that direction. But that there are some really significant impacts on the world. So that was the first time I had heard that. So that says a lot to me about your company, that you're focusing in on kind kind of the full picture, very comprehensive approach to how do we make this decision about the chemistry that is going to, about a new technology that's going to be integrated to all of our lives. Not only, what is the safest, what gives us the best value, and what can we kind of confidently say that is a good approach from the full picture, from right on how it's developed all the way up through how we use it. So that's just some amazing stuff. Now, let me ask you, thank you for all the hard work there and for helping point the industry in a really positive direction. I would like to know about some of the activities that you have out there. You are involved in, humanitarian, commercial, military. As per your website, you kind of got outreach in a lot of areas. What are some of the deployments that you'd like to tell us about? Some things that are happening around the world right now. I'm sure you're probably poking around Puerto Rico and some of these areas. I mean, is there anything particularly exciting that you'd like to share with us about some of the things that are happening out there?
Sure. Well, going back to that early decision as a company to focus on a safer chemistry, but that was more expensive, it forced us to innovate some solutions that weren't available in the market. So if the upfront price point is higher than, say, the lithium batteries that are available, like the lithium, cobalt, oxide, then the cycle life and the efficiency rate, so 10,000 cycles, 98% efficiency rate, the rapid charge and discharge, we have a portfolio of solutions developed first and foremost with the military. All these performance metrics feed into what you mentioned, the levelized cost of energy. So the performance profile of the battery directly relates to the ROI and that levelized cost and what you're paying per kilowatt hour over the life of the battery. And so the higher cost, if you will, and choosing to build a market and a solution around safety and a more sustainable supply chain forced us in some respects to innovate storage solutions that have this very robust profile so that we were able to create solutions in the market for applications in territories that other companies, that other batteries just were not able to fulfill.
Okay.
So the early work we did with the military, to your question, some of the projects that are important to us, when we began in 2010, the thought was really reaching the 1.2 billion people that live beyond the grid, who are marginalized because they don't have access to power. And we initially thought that NGOs and humanitarian economic development, rural electrification type entities would be interested, but it was actually our own Department of Defense in creating energy security on forward operating bases for men and women in Afghanistan and Iraq. So again, looking at the price point question, how do we create a solution that's going to last a very long time? Again, so over the life of the battery, that cost per kilowatt hour is very low, if not the lowest in the industry, and to create a robust profile that could satisfy requirements in very hot and challenging climates. So what we were able to prove out through years of military deployments and tests through the military, we were then able to apply in regions of the world that had equally challenging environments and use cases, such that we were able to then begin to look at rural electrification and projects in remote areas and begin to make inroads in reaching that 1.2 billion. So projects that we have in remote clinics and hospitals from different countries in Africa to Haiti, and the projects with the schools in Hawaii is another example, coming up with innovative solutions that otherwise the environment or the use case is too challenging.
Wow. So there's just for our listeners, if I may interrupt for one moment. So you just mentioned, Catherine, about the Cooling in the Schools initiative. So our listeners here will be familiar with that. That was a really big thing, maybe about 2-3 years ago, when the kids in our schools were just the temperatures really went kind of out of control, and then of course the governor passed that the initiative, and then they were looking for opportunities. And I think you brought this up on the last show to be able to to install cooling systems, solar-powered air conditioning systems, for example, things of that nature. But the infrastructure upgrades were prohibitively expensive, right? We're outside of the overall budget.
Yeah.
And SimpliPhi became one of the great mechanisms that helped to kind of solve that, right? You had said reduce the overall budget considerably. So that's pretty exciting. That's something that was near and dear to the hearts of our listeners out here for sure. And then, as you're talking about these, the military, I remember just another point here, if I may, but I remember going to the Pacific Defense Resiliency Defense seminars out in Oahu. I can't remember the exact name, and the military leadership was there talking about how they had made this shift from renewable energies and energy efficiencies when it's convenient to this is actually our strategic objective. And they talked about the costs of bringing fossil fuels to the front, forward projecting kind of forces, and that it was far beyond what you would expect. Like the cost of a gallon of diesel is so expensive to get it out there to keep this that operation moving. And then so you were able to test your products in that space, which is what a wonderful place it is to be able to kind of test it in this very harsh conditions. And then you have it now available for your humanitarian efforts, like you're talking about, the 1.2 billion people without clean energy in the world. It's amazing. And of course, now I'm thinking about Peace Boat and EcoShip
any energy,
and all
not
of
just
that.
clean.
Right. Okay, so I'm sorry, I didn't interrupt you there. Please continue.
No. Well, that point about the military really helping us prove out and validate the technology, but it also started, again, going back to our CTO in the film movie industry. That sounds very exciting, but failure is not an option. And very often the challenges around shooting movies on site lends itself to, ironically enough, military applications, and then the military applications and validations and years of deployments there then helped us get to other remote territories and prove that out. So
what an arc, right? What an evolution of the product. Yes, it's amazing.
Yeah. And also the fact that as a company, we talk about early in a market, the supply chain, the raw materials, everything is more costly because it doesn't have the economy of scale and that supply chain that's been built out for years. And nonetheless, our company, unlike others in the industry with VC support, we chose to build the company on a revenue-based model only. And so that also made us very conscious of not just the technology and the performance profile and going back to the performance metrics of the battery, the efficiency rate, cycle life, the ability to rapidly discharge and charge in 15 minutes or an hour or 2 hours or whatever the use case was. It made us very aware that we had to come up with a product that financially, again, over the life, made sense. So as a company, we've been doubling year over year. Last year, we tripled. This year, we're moving to a new location. We've outgrown our headquarters here in Ojai.
Wow.
And it's exciting. We're also looking at sites overseas for manufacturing as well. Part of that model is to really look at the need for manufacturing jobs in the clean energy sector and having an economic impact where we're also creating solutions that can help shift away from a preponderance on or reliance on heavy fossil fuels and a greater reliance on renewable energy.
Once again, full picture thinking here, right? So what I want to do is I want to bring it back because you've talked about starting out in cinema, moving over in testing in these kind of really challenging environments like the military, getting into the opportunity for humanitarian work, and now let's think a little bit about the residential homeowner here in Maui. A lot of our listeners they fit this kind of profile. So how can they? I know you mentioned earlier on the previous show about some of the distributors and such, but I mean. For them, what does a system look like for them, and how can they go about getting one? And we've got about a few minutes left here, Catherine, just to give you a heads up.
Yeah, and I do want to say that we work on grid as well as off. So for homeowners that are tied to the grid and that have made the investment in solar, many don't realize until the first power outage that when the grid goes down, so too does the access to the generation on their roof. And so to your question, what's a typical size, or how do we solve some of the pain points for residential customers? If you look at your home and you think about what are my critical loads, what's critical to me in a power outage, and unfortunately, the ability to answer that question is all too relevant for people throughout Hawaii, but also around the world. And if you think about your home and the critical loads, you have a refrigerator, you have some lights, you want to be able to have your communications powered up, your phones, your TV for news, whatever it is, a battery, 2 batteries. We scale systems from very small to hundreds of kilowatt hours, and now introducing our high voltage for megawatt hours. But for homeowners, critical loads could be a very small system. And if you have PV, you are maximizing that initial investment by adding batteries. When there's a power outage with batteries and the inverter charge controllers, your home will immediately island from the grid and allow you to go on generating and storing energy that's being generated and also powering your loads. Without batteries, you don't have that proposition.
So this could be a good like an AC coupled solution, for example, for existing NEMs that are out there. We have 60,000 deployed NEM systems throughout the state of Hawaii, and Governor Ige had recently signed a bill. I'm not sure the number the number of that bill, but that suggested that homeowners should be able to integrate batteries without ITR, standing for Initial Technical Review with the utility. So, and we've been kind of plugging the utility recently on battery expansion for NEMs, and they're saying that the paperwork, although I think they're still thinking they're in the middle of it, but the paperwork will be available this month. So it's very timely right now, Catherine, right? All of these NEMs out there can be integrating batteries, can be protecting themselves from these outages when we have these hurricanes like Lane. And what's the one that's out there right now, Jay? Is it Miriam?
Norman.
Yeah.
Norman? Yeah,
there's a couple of M's.
And it's also important to note that the economics for grid-tied day-to-day savings using storage. So not just during blackouts, but I believe, if my numbers are correct, on Oahu, customers now get about 15 cents per kilowatt hour for the smart exports, and that's during daylight hours, and about 10 cents per kilowatt hour for the customer grid supply that's power exported during the day. And I believe in 2017, the average retail rate of electricity was just over 28 cents per kilowatt hour. So
and it's been going up like crazy
your
too.
Solar power,
that's right. That's an Oahu number. We're over 30 cents, and we actually just had a raise.
I think we're probably.
I had a feeling my numbers may not apply to all the islands. And certainly, 2017 numbers are out of date.
Well,
but the point, yes.
Yeah, just recently we've had some increases in costs, and also the fuel surcharges have been going up. So I think the actual rate is probably floating north of 35 at the moment here in Maui. And I'll tell you what, Catherine, as usual with great shows, we don't have enough time. But I want to thank you so much for coming on the Solar Coaster. I look forward to Jay and I are really excited to meet you at SPI this year in Anaheim, only a couple weeks down the road. Learn all about the EcoShip project and more about your great company, SimpliPhi. So thanks so much.